while holding together the fragile coalition that helped Biden win in 2020. The latest polls show a race that has tightened in recent weeks and is now essentially a tie. Worrying for Democrats is that Trump has gained ground in the crucial blue wall states that offer Harris her clearest path to victory: Michigan, Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, as well as among Black and Latino voters. Although the race is neck and neck in the key swing states, poll numbers are within the margin of error. In other words, they could be wrong, but Harris's criticism of Trump, her Republican opponent, has become much darker in the last few days. At the convention, she laughed at Trump, dismissing him as an unserious man and weird. Now, she's calling him a fascist and increasingly unhinged and unstable. Harris's original message of wanting to bring joy has turned to one of fear, warning of what she says are the dangerous consequences of a second Trump term. Polling suggests Harris is likely to win the popular vote, but that will not be enough. She has to win key battleground states to win in the Electoral College. And let's say the reservations many voters still have about Harris, a woman they feel they still don't know enough about, are pretty strong. Harris has a very particular problem in Michigan, which has the highest concentration of Arab American voters in the United States. Biden won the state in 2020 by just over 150,000 votes, but his administration's inability to rein in Israel's attacks in Gaza and Lebanon has deeply hurt the party standing amongst the 300,000 Arab Americans living here. Harris, Biden's vice president, is being held equally responsible. Some young Arab Americans have in fact told reporters, "We believe there has to be accountability for all the lives lost. We do not forgive the Democrats for it, and we will not be scared into voting for them." Harris has spoken about her anger over the suffering in Gaza and Lebanon, but those voters want her to say she will refuse to supply weapons to Israel if they are used in strikes that kill civilians. In Michigan, the working class and union vote could prove pivotal too. The most important swing state is Pennsylvania because it has the largest number of votes in the all-important Electoral College. With polls deadlocked, both sides have poured hundreds of millions into advertising to reach undecided voters in the state. Also, a very large number of voters care the most about the economy, and it's an area where Trump seems to enjoy a significant advantage over his opponent. No matter how much Democrats point to rosy job numbers or economic growth, people simply felt better off 4 years ago before record high inflation cut into monthly budgets. Harris is focusing on women in the Pennsylvania suburbs, especially those who may usually vote Republican but are turned off by Trump's rhetoric and behavior. Recent Harris events where she has appeared with moderate Republicans like former Congresswoman Liz Cheney are aimed at persuading this group that it's preferable to vote Democratic even if you don't agree with Harris's policies, just to keep Trump out of the White House. Harris holds a very strong lead amongst female voters across the nation in an election with the country's biggest ever gender divide. She has not campaigned on the historic nature of her candidacy, almost never mentioning that if elected, she would be the first female president. But she does stress her support for women's reproductive rights. Trump boasts of appointing the Supreme Court justices who ended the nation's right to an abortion in place for over 50 years. But he knows that the very strict abortion bans that some states introduced afterwards are deeply unpopular, with a large number of voters forcing him to walk a careful line. In Arizona, one of the two battleground states in America's West, there is a proposition on the ballot to decide whether to enshrine abortion rights in the state constitution, effectively overturning the current law that forbids terminating a pregnancy after 15 weeks. The hope for Democrats is that women in the 10 states with such abortion ballot measures are driven to the polls by that issue and, while there, cast a presidential vote for Kamala Harris. Arizona polls suggest voters are likely to support the proposition by a wide margin, but that may not translate into votes for Harris. As many as 1 in 5 people say they plan to vote to guarantee abortion rights in Arizona, but at the same time cast a ballot for Trump. Neither Harris nor Trump know who will be the next president of the United States, nor do any of the pollsters or political pundits. But it appears Kamala Harris has not been able to sustain the excitement and optimism that she generated when she first became a presidential candidate. She now has to slog it out, fighting for every vote to stand a chance of breaking what the last woman to run for US President, Hillary Clinton, called the highest and hardest glass ceiling. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris basked in the support of rock legend Bruce Springsteen, entertainer Tyler Perry and former President Barack Obama on Thursday at a rally that drew thousands in the battleground state of Georgia. Seeking to excite supporters in a state that could help determine the winner of the 2024 election, the US Vice President and her high-profile endorsers urged the crowd to take advantage of early voting and to reject her Republican opponent, Donald Trump. Harris said, "We understand we have an opportunity before us to turn the page on the fear and divisiveness that have characterized our politics for a decade because of Donald Trump. Please vote early." Springsteen, before strumming Land of Hope and Dreams, declared that Harris is running to be the 47th President of the United States. Donald Trump is running to be an American tyrant. He does not understand this country, its history, or what it means to be deeply American. Obama seized on recent interviews in which John Kelly, the Republican nominee's former White House chief of staff, described the 45th president as an aspiring dictator and said he had expressed a desire to be served by generals like those who surrounded Adolf Hitler. Trump has denied the report, saying, "I never said that." Obama warned, and I quote, "Just because he acts goofy does not mean his presidency would not be dangerous. I want to explain that in politics, a good rule of thumb is don't say you want to do anything like Hitler. But it is useful because it gives us a window into how Donald Trump thinks." Obama's return to center stage is raising the question of whether 12 years after his last election win, he has the political muscle to take the once and possibly future president down. Analysts say Obama is feeling the fierce urgency of now again. The 44th president is logging more miles on the campaign trail than at any point since leaving the White House nearly 8 years ago. He's implored voters from Pittsburgh to Tucson to Las Vegas to back Kamala Harris, and by the week's end, the campaign blitz will have touched down in all 7 top battleground states. Obama said, "We do not need to see what an older, loonier Donald Trump looks like with no guardrails. America is ready to turn the page. We are ready for a better story." Observers say America's first black president, who once hailed his generation of voters as a people of improbable hope, is sounding far less optimistic as Americans prepare to render a verdict for the 3rd straight time on Donald Trump. Obama's re-emergence on the campaign trail for Kamala Harris comes as he recognizes that his own legacy is at stake. The controlled fury of his speech on Thursday night and his intense engagement this week shows that the November election is more than merely a race for Kamala Harris. It's a battle that will show whether anyone is still listening to Barack Obama. It's been said that Obama's legacy is on the line in this election, and it is true in a new term. The man who once told swooning crowds that we are the change that we seek delivered a far more pragmatic pitch, warning, "Sometimes I think we expect so much that we end up disappointed when everything's not immediately solved." Obama's caustic roasts of Trump, his gift for framing the stakes of an election, and the way he has made a far more compelling case for Harris's election than even she has managed for herself, shows that his political skills are undiminished. That's helped his fans to accept Kamala Harris, only 3 years younger than Obama at 60, as the next recipient of his torch. Kamala Harris is facing a far more challenging environment, though, than then-Senator Barack Obama encountered in 2008. He was the insurgent after an 8-year Republican presidency marred by George W. Bush's failures in Iraq and New Orleans, which left the country desperate for change. This year's Democratic nominee is an incumbent in an unpopular administration. Obama's young voters, intoxicated by hope in 2008, are entering middle age with the same struggles with high grocery prices and mortgage rates that Trump's voters are experiencing. And while Bruce Springsteen is America's poet of the working class, many blue-collar voters have deserted Democrats in recent elections for Trump's populist GOP. And the former president is about to be upstaged by the biggest political star in his family. Former First Lady Michelle Obama, who's become a female icon, will campaign with Kamala Harris on Saturday in Michigan. At this point, marquee events are more about driving a party's voters to the polls than changing minds. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, campaigning in the border swing state of Arizona on Thursday, called America a garbage can because of immigration policies under the Biden administration. He said, "We like a garbage can." It's the first time I've ever said that, and every time I come up and talk about what they've done to our country, I get angry. First time I've ever said garbage can, but it is a very accurate description at this point, he said. Candidates and their surrogates for both presidential campaigns are blitzing swing states like Arizona in the final 2 weeks before Election Day. The Republican vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance held 2 campaign rallies in Arizona earlier this week. Joe Biden and the former President Barack Obama are set to visit this week, as is Tim Walz, the Democratic vice presidential pick.
Feeling stressed about the upcoming election? You're not alone. An American Psychological Association poll taken earlier this year found that 65% of U.S. adults felt exhausted by politics, while 55% felt angry.
You hear so much on both sides nonstop, like it's the end of democracy.
2 different characters, outlook on life. It's just a crazy world.
He is only focused on himself.
She's a low IQ individual.
This is therapist Laura Goldstein.
It's stress, it's anxiety, it's fear. It can sometimes be anger or outrage.
She says the election has increasingly come up during client sessions.
I think one of the other big things that we're seeing a lot of is people struggling to connect because it doesn't always feel safe to talk about. You don't know what environments are a safe environment to have political conversations or to discharge some of the stress.
Carrie Jarvie is a mental health counselor.
Yeah, if someone's experiencing stress leading up to this election cycle, it starts with reflecting on what is my level of media consumption? Has it reached the point where it's not helpful anymore?
He says people suffering from election anxiety should seek activities that decrease interaction from the media.
What are the things that make you feel like yourself?
Like surfing or going on a trail.
Election-wise, yeah, no one talks election.
This is a good release to be out in nature.
We're a dumping ground. We're like a...
With the U.S. presidential election just a week and a half out, Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris and her Republican rival Donald Trump continued their respective campaign blitzes across swing states on Thursday. Harris held her largest political rally yet in the city of Clarkston in Georgia, one of 7 battleground states that will likely decide who wins the presidency on November 5th. Rock legend Bruce Springsteen, film director Spike Lee, and former President Barack Obama were among the high-profile Harris endorsers that took part. They, along with Harris, urged the crowd of some 20,000 to take advantage of early voting and to reject Trump.
What I cannot understand is why anybody would think that Donald Trump will shake things up in a way that is good for you, because there is absolutely no evidence that this man thinks about anybody but himself.
After an initial bump in the polls after launching her campaign in late July, Harris's lead has since evaporated in key swing states. The latest polls in Georgia now show Trump with a slight lead, but Harris campaign officials say they remain confident the state is still in play. Thursday's rally represented the latest attempt by her campaign to capitalize on the backing of celebrities to mobilize voters in the closing days of a tight election race. On Friday, she is set to appear with Beyoncé in Houston. Meanwhile, Trump on Thursday evening held a rally on the Arizona State University campus in Tempe, Arizona. Maricopa County, where Tempe is located, narrowly went for Biden over Trump in the 2020 election and remains one of the fiercest battlegrounds in the country.
What she's done and he's done, Crooked Joe and Kamala, what a combination. Worst combination in the history of our country.
Trump took shots at his customary list of targets, criticizing Biden and Harris's competence. He also made false claims about immigrants and a spike in violent crime. Studies show immigrants are not more likely to engage in criminality.
And we will put these vicious and bloodthirsty criminals in jail, or we'll kick them the hell out of our country as fast as we can.
More than 30 million voters have already cast their ballots as of Thursday evening, according to tracking data from the election lab at the University of Florida. More than 13 million of those votes were in person, with more than 17 million by mail-in ballot, according to the data.
But the third most beautiful word is the word tariff. You know, it really did. Tariffs needed a press agent because all these crooked politicians, they didn't like it. You know, they're all taken care of by foreign countries. They don't like tariffs. But we're doing the tariffs, and we're going to, you know, I charged China was charged by me hundreds of billions of dollars over the last few years that we were in the administration. In fact, Biden hasn't been able to get rid of them because they make so much damn money. They can't justify getting rid of them. He'd love to because they paid him a lot of money, China. They've given him a lot of money. They come in, we have no idea who they are, where they come from. They come from parts unknown. They come from parts unknown, giving them taxpayer benefits at your expense. They say, come to America, we'll give you health care. Try going into a hospital now. Try going into a hospital. Go to Springfield, Ohio. Try getting into the hospital. They have this beautiful community of 52,000 people. And they just sent 30,000 people into Springfield, Ohio that don't speak English.
All right. Well, the race is tight. The rhetoric is shrill. Just days to go before the high-stakes November 5th presidential election in the United States. We'll discuss all dimensions of this with our panel of experts in just a moment after this quick break on Global Lens.
It's said that out of 7 diamonds across the world, 5 are cut and polished in India.
Don't forget, US is the largest consumer of, polished diamonds and the diamond jewelry. And that has taken a big beating for multiple reasons, but largely because of the consumer spending going down on these items. And that's essentially what has hit the diamond industry.
We are at a brim where you see not just one, but multiple very strong global brands coming out of India. And we will make a global mark, and I'm convinced about that.
This and more. Streaming on News9 plus news is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Hey, why are so many lights on? Is it Navroz?
Settling accounts, uncle?
No, writing a love letter. Check your accounts every day and ensure there is no mismatch. Exchange sends trade-related messages daily. Do timely verification. And if there is a mismatch, inform the exchange immediately.
सोच कर, समझ कर, इन्वेस्ट कर.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna, and we're discussing the presidential election in the United States that's heating up, and polls seem to suggest it's getting tighter by the day. All right, let's introduce our guests. Ambassador Manju Seth, former Indian diplomat and a distinguished fellow at the Forum for Global Studies, is with us. Also joining us on Global Lens tonight is Vivek Mishra, Deputy Director of Strategic Studies Program at the Observer Research Foundation. He joins us live from Washington, D.C. And Dr. Vineet Prakash, Associate Professor of U.S. Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, is also with us. A very warm welcome to all my guests. Let me begin with Vivek Mishra. Mr. Mishra, you know, I find it fascinating how American political observers are looking at Kamala Harris's campaign strategy and rhetoric of the last few days. They say gone are the days where she would project the message of hope and optimism and joy for a brighter future for Americans. Now she is painting increasingly a grim picture of a country that's going to be in a lot of trouble if Donald Trump is re-elected. She's now called him a fascist, saying he's increasingly unhinged and unstable. Do you believe that with this race tightening with every passing day, alarm bells may well be ringing within the Democratic Party? Because while there was a lot of jubilation and optimism at the time when she replaced Joe Biden on the Democratic ticket, but as election day draws closer, there seems to be this sense of panic setting in within the Democratic Party, with many of them now wondering, can she really carry the day as she faces a rather tough contest against Donald Trump?
Yeah, so there's certainly a on the edge feeling within the Democratic Party, in the sense that now, as you said, the race has tightened, and particularly so because the Republican Party has a trend where they catch up in the polls, in the sense that if Trump were even 3-4 points behind, the Republican Party's voting pattern consistently in presidential elections have gone on to cover that gap. That's not the case. The case is the tables have turned on the Democrats, and as you said, the initial lead, the initial euphoria that set in within the Democratic Party after she replaced Biden. So there was a new energy. There was, the aspects of age, gender, etc., sort of were turned on Donald Trump. That seems to be tempering for the Democratic Party, and I think that really leaves the Democratic Party hankering. But in my conversations with some of the team of Kamala Harris, I mean, they're pretty confident, but the polls don't reflect that. It could, it's so tight. As you know, this morning, CNN and Times Now and New York Times polls suggest that they are neck to neck, which is not looking good for the Democrats. So what can she do differently in the sense that she'll be able to catch up because there is not enough time left before you just have 2 weeks. And many of these town halls that she's done hasn't really cut with the voters on the other side. So she's trying to sway some undecided voters, which is, and Trump's voter base is pretty consolidated and it's vertical. It's not lateral like Kamala's voter base. So I think there's a difference. She's not able to cut into Donald Trump's vote. And I think the Republican Party has remained consistent. In fact, they have been able to turn some of the because she also in her interviews has evaded some direct answers to questions. So she's been asked on policy specifications, which she hasn't answered. She's given circular arguments, etc. And that really has annoyed many of the undecided voters. And I think you're seeing the gap being leveled.
Right, the gap is certainly narrowing, and that should be a big source of concern for Kamala Harris and the Democrats. And what is worrying for the Democrats at this point is that Trump seems to have actually gained ground in the crucial blue wall states. Let me take this to Ambassador Manju Seth. Now, Ambassador Seth, there are many pollsters who believe that Kamala Harris may well comfortably win the popular vote, but we know that that will be far from enough to ensure that she gets elected to the White House, because she needs to win the key battleground states in order to win the electoral college votes that eventually seal the deal for any American president. We all know what happened in 2016, Hillary Clinton winning the popular vote, yet losing the election to Donald Trump, who picked up more electoral college votes and went on to become the United States president. Do you believe that the Democrats and Kamala Harris have a lot to worry about in the battleground states? And the growing refrain amongst many, let's say, undecided voters in the US seems to be, we don't know enough about her. Now, of course, that has a lot to do with the fact that she entered the presidential contest rather late in the day and did not perhaps have adequate time to campaign and to really give the American people an opportunity to know who she is and what she truly stands for, except that, of course, she's someone who is bitterly opposed to Donald Trump and says that she's fighting for democracy and he is somebody who is fascist, who wants to be a dictator and who is going to ruin American democracy.
You put it absolutely correctly, Neha, that the debate now has become more personal, should I say, and it's as it enters the final phase of a phase towards the going forward to the elections. And I think though her popularity was there initially, it seems to have come down in the key states, which are the main battleground states. And again, because as vice president, overall, there's not too much, and she's not been very active on various issues. And usually, of course, as vice president, you cannot be independently active. You do follow what the president, the policies, or you enunciate the policies of the president. So I think that is also a setback for her, can be a setback for her. And the initial euphoria of her presidency, of her presidential candidacy, I think seems to be wearing down a bit. And as you rightly said, she might win the popular vote, but in the main swing states, in the main deciding states, whether she will manage to get ahead, we don't know. And the battlegrounds, the main battleground states. And that, I think there it appears that former President Donald Trump seems to be in the lead. And, her policies on, and I think one of the main issues has become immigration, of course. And the wars, the two wars that are ongoing. And, they're almost never-ending wars. So the people of America are tired and they want change. And I think there's a general perception that the Democrats love wars, I think. So I think that is another factor which may go against Kamala Harris. And the fact that while both former President Trump and the Democrats, both Republicans and Democrats, are supporting Israel to some extent. I mean, though the Democrats have been warning Israel, but yes, they will continue to supply arms to the Israelis, arms and ammunition. But people, I think, in general, are a little fatigued. There's war fatigue setting in, and they have got a kind of reputation in the Democrats that they are warmongers in some ways. So I think that is a problem. Then abortion was a problem. There is a lot of support for her within the women voters for Kamala Harris, but again, as you very rightly said, the battleground states are key to whether she will win or not. And so we have to, it's really a very close fight, and things change very rapidly in the US elections. And I think a large number have already voted in advance voting, which is a very interesting trend very interesting phenomena in the US, where all the votes are not cast on that one day. So already a lot of advance votes are there. So they also may be determining factors by post and by postal ballot. They may have come. So there was this debate last time over counting of the postal ballots also. So I think all those will be issues when the counting of votes takes place, and it is going to be very, very close. Absolutely.
It's going to be very close, and it looks like it is the Democrats that are feeling the pressure more than the Republicans at this point in time. And, you brought up the issue of immigration, which no doubt has emerged as one of the central issues in this election campaign. And just yesterday, while campaigning in the swing state of Arizona, Donald Trump said, America is a garbage can because of the immigration policies that have been pursued by the Biden administration. And interestingly, in the CNN town hall, when Anderson Cooper put a pointed question to Kamala Harris about whether she supported Trump's idea of a wall, she was rather evasive about it, because in recent months she's tried to take a more hawkish stand on the issue of immigration, knowing that it's a very sensitive issue for the American people and one which gives Donald Trump a clear advantage over her. Okay, let me now go across to Dr. Vineet Prakash. Dr. Prakash, do you agree with those who believe that Kamala Harris may be on shaky ground in the battleground states. And that is where the real worry for the Democrats lies at the moment. So much so that Trump seems to have in fact even made gains in the blue states in recent times.
Neha, it's a very important question because this election is going to be decided in these battleground states. So the only thing I would like to add to what the other two speakers have said so far is that the election was always a close race in these 7 battleground states that we're talking about. So from the time Harris entered the campaign and till this point, the margin of lead between the two candidates has never been more than a percentage point or so. It has always been within the margin of error. So I won't say there's anything new or a new trend that we can talk about, something which indicates that the election can go either way. So it has been a close race because it is these 7 states which are going to decide the election. And looks like it is going to be this way till the election day, that is November 5th. So as of now, it's a toss-up. Either of the candidates can win, according to me. And second thing which I would like to point out is that there's a sort of confirmation bias appearing in the comments of most of the commentators which we are listening to. So confirmation bias is something where we try to look at things from what has happened in the past. So that is the perspective which determines our view of what is likely to happen in the future. So most people think that a woman candidate lost to Trump in 2016, that is Hillary Clinton. So another woman candidate might not stand a good chance. And similarly, most people believe that Americans are still not ready for a woman president. So I would say that Harris definitely has a better chance than Clinton because in 2016, Donald Trump was a fresh face. In comparison, now you have an 8-year image of Donald Trump as a politician in US. So assuming that what happened to Clinton when there was a contest with Trump in 2016 is going to be repeated when there's a contest between Harris and Trump, is sort of prejudging the outcome of this election. So the only thing I would like to add in conclusion is that it's still a close election and it can go either way.
Pramit Pal Chaudhary, foreign policy and political analyst at Eurasia Group, is also with us at this point. Welcome back to Global Lens, Pramit. Let me ask you this question. There are many who believe that the initial euphoria that Kamala Harris replacing Biden on the Democratic ticket had generated seems to now be giving way to a fair amount of anxiety and near panic within the Democratic ranks. Do you believe this is because Harris seems to be on shaky ground in the battleground states? And also, if you look at some of the key issues that have emerged in this election, immigration, abortion, the economy and the wars, Kamala Harris actually seems to be on the back foot on many of these issues. Even though the Biden administration says that the American economy is doing so much better than it has done in a very long time, Americans seem to feel somehow that they were better off 4 years ago than they are today. If you talk about the issue of immigration, it certainly looks like it's a massive advantage for Donald Trump, and Kamala Harris cannot seem to shake off the Biden legacy. After all, she has been vice president for 4 years in the Biden administration. And talking about the wars, the unpopular wars that are going on around the world, especially the one in the Middle East, there are, a huge number of Arab Americans who say that they are very unhappy with both Biden and Kamala Harris, because even though Kamala Harris keeps talking about how much, how strongly she feels about the Palestinian lives that are being lost, yet she simply refuses to commit to cutting off weapons supply to Israel. And then again, comes in that whole question of whether she can shake off the Biden legacy. And many Arab American voters have actually been quoted by the American media in recent days as saying there has to be accountability. We're not going to forgive the Democrats for the lives that have been lost in Gaza and Lebanon, and we will not be scared into voting for them. So if some of us thought that Arab Americans would have no choice but to go with Kamala Harris because a Trump presidency for them would be far worse, that may not necessarily be the case. Some of them are not in a forgiving mood.
Well, let's talk first, I think, about the issue of you're right that Harris came out of the convention, out of the debates in a bit of a high, and you saw that in a number of key swing states, notably Michigan, Wisconsin. She ratcheted up as much as 3 to 4% leads in those states, and was in fact a little ahead in almost all the northern swing states, and even states like Georgia and North Carolina were in play. That seems to have receded. It's hard to tell because there's a well-known Republican tactic of launching a bunch of should we say, biased polls in the run-up to the election. Not so much because they think it'll affect the electorate, but it makes it look like the lead candidate, the Democratic candidate, is slipping. I think in Michigan, she still is doing reasonably well. That if you look at the polls that I would consider credible, she still has about a 2 to 3% lead. Wisconsin, however, she has slipped badly, and she's now virtually tied. And Pennsylvania is within the margin of error, statistical margin of error. And in the other swing states, it's too close to call. So she slipped a little. It's not, and I think, but the point is, most voters in America have already decided who they're going to vote for. So the debates on abortion, on immigration, and so on remain somewhat academic for many of them. But Harris is very clearly trying to move to the center. The base of her party, she, I think, rightly believes has no place to go. They can't stand Trump. I mean, it's almost a huge, it's almost impossible for them to consider voting for Trump. Her issue is, can I swing a bunch of the moderate Republicans? Because many Republicans don't like Trump either. The genuine conservative, old school Republicans look at Trump and say he does not represent family values. He does not reflect fiscal conservatism, and he in fact was a Democrat most of his life. He doesn't represent anything really Republican at all. Can she swing those? And I think we've seen her language. She's talked about the fact that she owns guns, that she's prepared to use them to defend her house. She's taken a slightly harder stance, especially on illegal migration, and so on. And these are very clearly, I think, shifts to the center. And she's decided that's the way to try to splinter off some of that Republican vote that looks at Trump and says, we don't really like this character. He's not genuinely one of us. And that's maybe about 20% of the Republican Party. When it comes to the Arab American, it's a more complicated issue. Yes, they're very angry with the Democrats. But, for them, their problem ultimately is still the vast majority of Americans support Israel, and they support the policy of supporting an American ally. There is nobody, there is sympathy for the Palestinians, especially in Hamas. There is no sympathy for Hezbollah, which is widely seen as just as a terrorist group that has deliberately provoked Israel. So for Harris, I think it's a sensible gamble. The Arab American, when he eventually goes to the poll, to the ballot box, he's going to have to say, do I vote for Trump, who has almost exactly the same policy and in fact probably will increase supplies of weapons and support an attack on Iran? Or do I go for Harris, who at least supports things like migration and ethnic diversity? Or do I just stay home, which is quite possible. A lot of Arab Americans may decide to not bother to vote. But I think for Harris, I don't think the Arab Americans are a large enough group of people, and they're very diverse. It's not like there's a solidified, homogenous group of Arabs. Her bigger problems, I think, are young Black American males, especially those who place themselves very high on what is sometimes called a masculinity index. They're often misogynistic, very homophobic. They're not happy with her. The same is true in some large chunks of the Hispanic population. And those are core parts of the Democratic coalition. And those are the groups she needs to win over. And that's where I think people like Barack Obama have come out and tried to campaign on our behalf and try to persuade these groups to come back. That is, I think, much more important than Arab Americans, though Arab Americans are crucial in states like Michigan.
All right. It's interesting you refer to Barack Obama because that's what I wanted to talk about next. So let me take this to Vivek Mishra. Mr. Mishra, we've seen how Barack Obama has stepped on the gas really in the last few days. And by the end of this week, he would have campaigned for Kamala Harris in every one of those 7 battleground states. But what I find very interesting is this, how American analysts seem to think that America's first president, who once hailed his generation of voters as a people of improbable hope, is increasingly sounding less and less optimistic this time around as he campaigns for Kamala Harris and as, the election draws closer. There are those who say that, he once told swooning crowds, we are the change that we seek. But now he is delivering a far more, shall we say, pragmatic pitch, warning, sometimes I think we expect so much that we are disappointed when everything's not immediately solved. Is it being pragmatic, or is it just hard for Obama to now be as optimistic as he was back then in 2008, and then when he sought his own re-election 4 years later? Clearly, America has changed dramatically between 2016 and now in the Donald Trump era, if I may put it that way. Do you think this also in a way suggests, the kind of nervousness that may have crept into the Democratic ranks in recent days? And also, what do you make of the fact that there are many who are not just critical of Kamala Harris's shifting stance on certain issues such as immigration, but also seem to be suspicious about it?
Yeah, there's been a lot of recalibrations in both the parties. I mean, if you look at the Democratic Party, the inherent character, as was seen in the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, and if you look at the RNC, there were 2 stark differences. You had the whole party, virtually the Democratic Party, standing behind Kamala Harris, and Barack Obama being one of them. But on the contrary, you had all the stalwarts of the so-called old guard of the Republican Party missing, for example, the Mitt Romneys and the Bushes. So there's been a fundamental change in the character of both the parties. But coming to Obama, I think obviously from the times of his own nomination to now, grounds have shifted considerably. There's been the demographic shift, there's been a political shift, there's been deep polarization. All the indices pointing to polarization have gone up in the United States. So I think there's been a great degree of shift, which is what the Kamala Harris campaign has to deal with. And you see virtually in the Democratic Party, a former president has stepped up. There's very few, personas like Obama. But I think even that may be very slow in cutting into the solid Republican vote. So I think there is a realization among the elites of the Democrats, for example, the Obamas, the Pelosi's, and the Clintons, that this needs to be, the gas needs to be stepped up. And I think that is why you've seen a slew of campaigns by Obama. But as you said, also coming on some of the points that were made earlier, I think there's been three broad trends that have gravitated towards Trump. One is, as pointed out by Pramit, which is the Black African-American men gravitating towards Trump. Second is the Hispanics. And the third is the Arab. The last week there was a poll where young Arab men have started gravitating towards Trump. So those are 3 key trends which are actually showcasing the frustration that some of the peripheral Democrats or even the undecided voters have. So I think there is a realization within the Democratic Party that the grounds have shifted too much, and really this needs to be dealt at the helm by the elites of the Democrats.
All right, so are alarm bells really ringing for the Democrats right now? And I think it would be safe to say that Barack Obama is also personally invested, in a sense, in this election and in Kamala Harris' win, because he realizes that his own legacy really is on the line here. Let me now go back to Ambassador Manju Seth. Ambassador Seth, I will ask you a slightly different question. Even though throughout this election we've seen that Kamala Harris has perhaps not once referred to, her gender, the fact that if she wins, she'll be the first female president of the United States of America, would have created history, would have smashed that proverbial glass ceiling, something that was the leitmotif of the Hillary Clinton campaign back in 2016. She's made a conscious effort to not refer to her gender and perhaps not to refer even to her ethnicity. But there are some in America today who say that this is not a contest of equals. Different rules seem to apply to the two candidates. While Trump, and I'm sure that this comment has come from a Trump critic, one analyst on CNN said that while Trump gets to be lawless, Kamala Harris has to be flawless. Now, is that really at the end of the day all about her gender? And do you agree that perhaps it is unfair, the rules are not being equally applied to the two candidates here?
Absolutely, that is absolutely the norm. I think things have changed a lot. I think the biases haven't completely gone away. And yes, as you rightly said, people expect her to be flawless in every way, and he can be, Trump can be as lawless as possible, and he will still get by. Absolutely, I think that has changed a lot, and I think but still, it's difficult to say whether the US is ready for a female president. And Kamala Harris, I think, by not focusing on her gender, etc., is trying to make it a kind of gender-neutral kind of battle, and going more on what she stands for, her policies, and the action that she intends taking for America. While Trump is more focused on, of course, immigration and his MAGA campaign, making America great again. It's that is also resonating a lot with people. And though he has not said anything about her gender, he has spoken a lot about her false claims or something, which he said that she's Indian and her ethnicity, etc. So the fact that Kamala Harris represents both a woman and ethnic background is a challenge for her, in some ways, because the glass ceiling still exists, I think, though, and many people and there have been these diverse views in the US saying that some are saying America is ready for a lady president, some are saying no, America is not yet. So it really, and as we saw in some of these statistics that you're showing on screen, from the male support for Kamala Harris is much lower as compared to Donald Trump, because I think males are not yet ready, or the American males, I think, are not yet ready for a female president. And I think that might be a small factor, not a major factor, but it might be a small factor going against Kamala Harris. But of course, the fact that she did not want to sort of focus on this issue see, men voters 41%, Donald Trump 55%. Already, you can. It's already there. The bias exists. But if many women turn up, more women turn up, then the chances of her getting more votes is there. But I think America and generally, I think, and America being the most powerful and the most important country, people are looking to see when they will break that glass ceiling.
Exactly. It's 2024, for God's sake. It's the world's oldest democracy. They lecture everyone else around the world about a democracy. They have not had a woman president till date. As I wrap up this conversation, I will take closing comments from my other two panelists. Dr. Vineet Prakash, is America ready for a female president? And let's not forget, abortion rights have emerged as a central issue in this election. Kamala Harris is obviously hoping to capitalize on it, but can she ensure that enough women voters step out of their homes to cast their ballots in favor of the Democratic ticket?
You're right, Neha. For the Democrats and Harris, abortion is a key issue. So the message has been simplified to two things for the Democrats. One is that Donald Trump is unhinged, he's unstable, not fit enough to be a president. And secondly, the focus is on abortion as an issue. In comparison, for Trump, the message is focused upon how the Democrats have done on the economic front in the past 4 years, how inflation has raised the living costs for Americans, day-to-day living costs. And secondly, the focus is on immigration, which is the biggest issue. So Trump is hammering on those two things. In comparison, for Democrats, it is these two issues which are critical, and they hope that they are able to bring out sufficient number of voters based on these issues on which they are campaigning. Now, whether America is going to elect the first woman president or not, that we'll get to know only after November 5th. I'm not going to go into making any sort of prediction because it's still a very close race without any clear indicators as to which way this election can go. So time will tell as to who emerges as a winner in this contest for the White House.
Pramit Pal Chaudhary, very quickly, why do you think Kamala Harris has studiously avoided referring to both her gender and ethnicity in this election campaign? Is it because she felt that she'd be playing into Trump's hands, that, making it gender agnostic somehow makes her more palatable to the American voters? Also, very quickly, what are the lessons do you think that the Democrats needed to learn from the 2016 electoral debacle that Hillary Clinton faced, where she won the popular vote but could not become the US president as she didn't have enough electoral college votes? What were the lessons there for the Democrats?
Well, the Democrats know that almost every Democratic president in recent history has always won the popular vote. Even Al Gore did. So, I mean, that's standard for the Democrats because they dominate the most populous, have traditionally dominated the most populous parts of the country, the big urban centers and so on. The Electoral College skews in favor of the smaller, less populated states, which tend to be conservative. So winning the popular vote, the Democrats know, is a nice thing for the history books. It is totally irrelevant in the election. It's all about the Electoral College, hence swing states and so on is so important to them and to everybody. So their game is that they need a super majority. They need to win much more than just 51% of the vote, and they need to win it in certain parts of the country. So they have always focused on this, and Obama did this quite brilliantly, working his way through a lot of those states. I think Hillary, in many ways, perhaps misjudged some of those states and how to handle them. Kamala, to be fair, has campaigned heavily in those states, and I think particularly, and then she chose a vice president who is from Minnesota, and that has ensured that Minnesota is not a swing state. There's a solid 6 to 7% swing in her favor since then. So she's played her cards, but it's not easy. As I said, most voters have already decided. She, in many ways, was a last-minute candidate. Keep that in mind. She has not been building a grassroots structure and reputation in those states because she didn't expect to be presidential candidate. And she didn't do very well in the Democratic primaries. So that's a lesson that it's there. She knows that, and she's now having to campaign incessantly. For her, I would say she's hoping for a bit of a surprise. You'll notice that some polls, while Texas would be considered completely Republican, we're starting to see a couple of polls that say Texas may be a swing state, indicating that even if she may be losing or slipping a bit in, let's say, Michigan or Pennsylvania, Texas, which is the second biggest state in the union, Trump is starting to slip. And so she's decided to go campaign there. And that's a good sign because it means it's going to be a much tighter fight than people may realize. So we'll see how this plays. It is extraordinarily close to call. Some of the studies that have come out have said as less than 100,000 people are going to decide this election in the United States. And that means pollsters are literally groping in the dark.
Isn't that remarkable? Less than 100,000 voters are going to decide this election, the outcome of which is going to have major consequences, not just for the American people for the next 4 years, but in fact for the entire world, because decisions taken by American presidents impact every part of the globe. And remember, there are two major wars that are currently going on, whose future course could very well be determined by the outcome of this election. On that note, Ambassador Manju Seth, Vivek Mishra, Dr. Vineet Prakash, Pramit Pal Chaudhary, thanks to all of you for joining me on Global Lens tonight. It is still anybody's election, a story we'll continue to track closely here on Global Lens. All right, as we wrap up the Friday edition, let's get you another interesting story from the US. A statue mocking those who stormed the US Capitol on 6th January 2021 has been installed in front of the same building. A swirly poop in bronze sits on a desk with California Representative Nancy Pelosi's name and was unveiled on Thursday. Below the installation is the explanation, which reads, and I quote, "This memorial honors the brave men and women who broke into the United States Capitol on 6th January 2021 to loot, urinate and defecate throughout those hallowed halls in order to overturn an election." Don't miss the sarcasm there. Pushing further with a sarcastic tone, the message also ropes in Donald Trump, saying President Trump celebrates these heroes of 6th January as unbelievable patriots and warriors. This monument stands as a testament to their daring sacrifice and lasting legacy. Remember that shocking incident in January 2021 when lawmakers gathered to ratify the 2020 presidential election and confirm Joe Biden as the President of the United States. Several officers were injured as a mob stormed the building with lawmakers seeking cover. One of the rioters was accused of pooping on Nancy Pelosi's desk. As the proceedings happened at the Capitol, Trump urged his supporters to force the then Vice President Mike Pence to overturn the election on social media. To this day, Trump denies that Biden won. This unique, eye-grabbing installation will stay there till the 31st of October. All right, that's all the time we have on the Friday edition of Global Lens. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great weekend ahead and do join us again on Monday.
How do you fulfill that promise? Because ultimately expectations have to be met. If you look at the political landscape, is it really changing for women? And what is the inability of the forces that dead bodies surface but not the living people?
In the heart of New York, an Indian spectacle unfolds. Step into the world of the Elite Saga, featuring influential Indians who've rocked the globe. From culinary geniuses,
this has been nothing less than a dream,
to the wisdom of sages.
And which is why success can never be spelt without you.
Discover the stories behind the stars. Experience the magic behind the scenes. At the first Indian event at the Statue of Liberty. Watch the Elite Saga, streaming only on News9 Plus. Download now.
Hello and welcome to News9 Plus show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. I'm Aditya Raj Kaul. Here are the top headlines today. Security forces have launched a massive search operation along the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir's Gulmarg sector, following the terror attack on October 24th that left 5 people, including 2 soldiers, dead. As many as 20 people have been killed in the Union Territory in the past 15 days. On a 3-day visit to India, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz met Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the Prime Minister's official residence, Lok Kalyan Marg, on October 25th. Earlier, Germany has accorded a special status to India on military purchase approvals. India and China have started the disengagement process at 2 friction points along the line of actual control, according to sources. On October 21st, India announced that it has reached an agreement with China on patrolling along the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh, ending a 4-year-old military standoff. The National Investigation Agency has announced a bounty of Rs 10 lakh for Anmol Bishnoi, the brother of gangster Lawrence Bishnoi, accused in a number of shootings conducted by the Bishnoi gang. Anmol Bishnoi is believed to be in Canada. Odisha Chief Minister Mohan Charan Manji claimed that the state has achieved its zero casualty mission since there has been no report regarding loss of human life or injury in the severe cyclonic storm Dana that made landfall on the Odisha coast on the night of 24th October. Former Indian High Commissioner Sanjay Verma said Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's inner circle included Khalistani extremists and anti-India elements. The Trudeau government was shielding extremists for domestic political compulsions, he added. The Supreme Court has declined to order a status quo on alleged illegal demolition of Muslim places of worship and other structures at Gir Somnath in Gujarat. The top court was hearing a contempt petition against Gujarat government authorities for allegedly illegally demolishing residential and religious structures in the state despite an interim stay and without a prior nod. Taiwan cherishes its freedom and democracy, and no external force can change its future, President Lai Ching-te said on October 25th. President Lai was visiting sensitive frontline islands next to China for the 75th anniversary of a key victory over communist forces. South Korea has expressed grave concern over Russia's bid to seal a defense pact with North Korea, which has been accused of supplying troops to Moscow for possible deployment in its war in Ukraine. Russia's lower house of parliament has voted unanimously to endorse the treaty that commits Moscow and Pyongyang to provide mutual assistance if either side is attacked. In yet another horrific terror attack on Thursday evening, 2 Indian Army soldiers were killed in action along with 2 porters when terrorists attacked an army vehicle in North Kashmir's Baramulla district. Massive search operations are currently underway to nab the terrorists. Authorities have suspended the gondola cable car service for tourists in Gulmarg as the search operations continue even as we speak right now. This attack comes merely days after the terror attack in Gandarbal of central Kashmir, where 7 innocent civilians working on a connectivity project, a tunnel, were mercilessly killed as well. A migrant worker was also attacked and injured in Tral of South Kashmir yesterday, but survived. Now the questions that we are asking on the News9 Plus show tonight. Is this the return of the most brutal form of Pakistan-sponsored terrorism in Kashmir 5 years after the Article 370 nullification? Is the Pakistan deep state carefully targeting connectivity projects and tourist hotspots to target economic activity in Jammu and Kashmir, which has seen an increase over the last few years? And how will India now calibrate its response militarily to Pakistan-sponsored terrorism, not just in the Jammu region, but now also a revival of sorts happening in the Kashmir Valley? Joining me to discuss this and a lot more, General Adar Hasnain, former GOC of the 15 Corps, also member of the NDMA. We also have senior journalist Ahmed Ali Fayaz joining us, and Dr. Ajit Singh, senior fellow of the Institute of Conflict Management. If I can begin by asking General Hasnain, so if I can, understand from you, what is really happening in the Kashmir Valley? We have been speaking about the return of peace, a return of calm, a kind of a suffocation for the terrorists really, but they seem to be now targeting connectivity projects, tourist hotspots. In fact, now we know that gondola service has been temporarily suspended. You, as someone who can perhaps, walk in Baramulla with his closed eyes and, treat Baramulla as his second home, how do you see this development, sir?
Thank you, Aditya. A very, very pertinent question. Let me try and explain this. You see, over the last 5 years, Government of India, the Indian security forces, the government of Jammu and Kashmir have all worked in very close consonance with each other and brought the situation to a near normalcy. The number of networks have been neutralized here, and the capability of Pakistan to be able to calibrate, carry out big acts of terror here has been reduced to a very great extent. However, at no stage can we ever claim that a neighboring state got a boundary with us, or very porous boundary to that matter, is going to withdraw its complete capability, its intent, and accept a kind of a defeat. It is going to calibrate further and continue to do these activities. Obviously, they are not in a position to do big acts at the moment. The strength of terrorists is also low. The amount of finances which are comparatively low, and the government of India, we have been able to make great inroads into people's support. So they decided to go into Jammu, to the Jammu region, which was comparatively weaker, more voids there, as we are aware. Forces had moved out from there to the line of actual control. They exploited this in the past 1.5 years or so. In the month of June, we also spoke, we discussed on your program. Lots of activities were happening in June post the Lok Sabha election. I always said Jammu is a sideshow. They are doing it for the tactical ploy. They're taking our attention there. They are going to come back to Kashmir because that's the center of gravity. That's exactly what they have done post the setting up the Umar Abdullah government. No, they can't do big acts here very easily. The deployment of the Indian Army, the rest of the security forces, is fairly large. And especially the urban centers like Anantnag, Baramulla, Shupian, Srinagar are very, very well held. You will find small actions taking place like the ones we found on the day of the inauguration of the government, the day the election results were given, kidnapping of a TA soldier, the killing of a migrant labor. Yesterday, Tral, again the killing or attempted killing of a migrant labor. And if they have to target security force facilities, they will hit peripheral areas. And that's exactly what happened. They hit Ganderbal. Now, Ganderbal is a misnomer. They hit actually Zojila, near Zojila. Yeah. That's an infrastructure project there. In fact, that very day on a certain program and my discussions with a lot of people, I said, is going to go back to peripheral areas again. Aditya, if you give me a minute more, I'll just explain.
Sure.
This is exactly what happened in 2015.
Yes.
In 2015, the 6th of December, we had an incident at a place called Mohra in the Jhelum Valley on a gun position of the Indian Army. So one would have expected a thing like that happening in the Jhelum